Well, we have been told for many years that we are becoming a more divided nation. We've been made to believe that differences of race and region, of wealth and gender, party and religion have separated us into warring factions, into red states, that would be Kansas, and blue states, made up of individuals with opposing wants and needs and with conflicting hopes and dreams. And it is a vision of America that's been exploited and encouraged by pundits and politicians who need this division to score points and win elections. It's an easy shorthand that a lot of people use to describe our political landscape. But it is a vision of America that I am running for president to fundamentally reject. I reject it not because of blind optimism, but because of a story that I've lived. Now, it's a story that began here in El Dorado when a young man fell in love with a young woman who grew up down the road in Augusta. We got some Augusta folks here? There you go. So they came of age in the midst of the Depression. And this young man found odd jobs on small farms and oil rigs, always dodging the bank failures and foreclosures that were sweeping the nation at the time. The young couple married just after war broke out in Europe. He enlisted in Patton's army after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. She gave birth to their daughter on the base at Fort Leavenworth, and she worked on a bomber assembly line when he left for war. In a time of great uncertainty and great anxiety, my grandparents held on to a simple dream that they could raise my mother in a land of boundless opportunity, that their generation's struggle and sacrifice could give her the freedom to be what she wanted to be, to live how she wanted to live. I am standing here today because that dream was realized. Because my grandfather got the chance to go to school on the GI Bill, buy a house through the Federal Housing Authority, and move his family west, all the way to Hawaii. The weather was a little warmer in Hawaii, where my mother would go to college and one day fall in love with another young man from Kenya. Now, I am here because that dream made my parents' love possible even then, because it meant that after my father left, when my mother struggled as a single parent and even had to turn to food stamps for a time while she was still going to school and working at the same time, she was still able to send my sister and me to the best schools in the country. And I am here because years later, when I found my own love in a place far away called Chicago, she told me of a similar dream. Some of you know my wife, Michelle, grew up in a working-class family on the south side of Chicago during the 1960s. Her father had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis when he was just 30 years old. And yet every day of his life, even when he had to rely on a walker to get him there, Fraser Robinson went to work at the local water filtration plant while his wife stayed home with the children. And on that single salary, he was able to buy a house, he was able to support a family, he was able to take a vacation once in a while, he was able to send Michelle and her brother to Princeton University. So our family's story, the story of my grandfather and grandmother, my mother, the story of Michelle and her parents. It's a story that spans miles and generations. It spans races and realities. It's the story of farmers and soldiers, city workers, and single moms. It takes place in small towns and in good schools, in Kansas and in Kenya, on the shores of Hawaii, and in the streets of Chicago. It is a varied and unlikely journey, but one that's held together by the same simple dream. And that is why it's an American story. That's why I can stand here and talk about how this country is more than a collection of red states and blue states, because my story could only happen in the United States of America. That's why I believe that we are not as divided as our politics suggest. That the dream we share is more powerful than the differences we have. I am living proof of that idea. And that is what I have seen all across this country over the course of this campaign. I've seen crumbling schools in South Carolina that are stealing the future of black children and white children. I've been told of the injustices in the growing divide between Main Street and Wall Street by the lowest paid workers, but also by folks like Warren Buffett, some of the wealthiest people on the planet. They both understand that our economy is out of balance. I've met auto workers in Iowa and teachers in New Hampshire and dishwashers in Nevada who are all fighting the same fight for better wages and decent benefits and a retirement that they can count on. And I've talked to young people and old people, Democrats, independents, and Republicans who love their country. They support their troops and believe it is time to bring those troops home from Iraq. So we are not as divided as our politics suggest. Yes, we disagree. Yes, we have interests and ideologies that don't always align. Yes, we have real differences. But the biggest divide in America today is not between its people. It is between its people and their leaders in Washington, D.C. That is where our collective dream has been deferred. That's where the money and the influence of lobbyists kill our plans to make health care more affordable or energy cleaner year after year after year. That's where campaign promises to keep jobs in America or put tax cuts in the pockets of working families are cast aside to make room for the politics of the moment. And that's where politicians would rather demonize each other to score points than come together to solve our common challenges.